Welcome, y'all. This garden is in need of some serious TLC, and we are going to take care of that today. First thing we're going to do is go through and get these weeds out and get these pathways cleared up. I'm going to clear these leaves back so we can see what we're dealing with, and then I'm going to gather up all the old dried stems, see what these brassicas look like, the ones that aren't thriving. We're going to pull them and throw them into the compost. If I had done things differently this fall, we would not be in this mess. So I'll show you what my solutions are. And I'm going to get the arches cleaned up. This year I'm planning to grow some butternut squash, some tromboncinos, and probably some runner beans on my arches. It's not only a space saver, it's so pretty and it makes my heart happy, and the arches are probably one of the favorite parts in the garden. The majority of my weeds were the purple dead nettle, and I didn't mind it so much because it could act as a ground cover, and it also came in handy for feeding the chickens. So I composted some of this, but a lot of it I fed to the chickens, and the ladies love it. Let's take a minute to enjoy the ladies. I did do basically the same cleanup minus pulling the weeds in the fall, but I did not mulch this deeply, and here we are with a problem. But we're going to take care of that here in the next few days. So what I did last fall is, as I would mulch the leaves, I would pile them in these four corners, hoping to get them mulched on the garden beds, but that didn't happen. But we're all cleaned up now, and we're going to get it done now. I've left some cabbages to go to seed and some kale that is still being able to be harvested. I did find these hiding out under the leaves and they survived all through the winter. They weren't the best, but they were better than what you can buy. And this lettuce here, it survived the winter. Now it's pretty bitter, but it's a nice snack for the bunnies from time to time, and I was able to use it all winter. Also, all spring, I collect grass clippings and just add it to the garden beds in sections wherever it needs it. The oak leaves are very thick and do not break down very fast at all if you left them whole. So if you have oak leaves, you must mulch them up beforehand. The boys are going to help, as usual. You can see how good that mulches things up. And it breaks down. So I mulched these 2 rows with the leaves that I just cleared out of the bed. And it covered this one bed and half of the middle bed pretty well. However, as you'll see later, I did not get it thick enough. And one of the solutions is to keeping the weed control down is you need at least 4 to 6 inches coverage to keep the weeds under control. But I'll come back and thicken this up as the spring goes on. But look how good that looks, so much better. One good way to get material to deep mulch garden is gather your own leaves. I'm fortunate enough that we have this huge old oak tree, and it produces so much mulch for me in the fall. However, the oak leaves are really thick and dense, and they don't break down unless you chop them up. So I went on Facebook Marketplace and bought me a really cheap push mower with a bagger on it. and I mow up the leaves and it mulches them up, and I just dump it where I want it. So the way I intend on tackling the weed pressure problem is I'm going to mulch 4 to 6 inches of the leaf mulch on each of my beds. You can also use straw, grass clippings. I'll continue to layer on different mulch materials as it becomes available throughout the summer. If you start seeing weeds popping through your mulch, it's a sign you just need to add more of some sort of mulch to that area. I will do a more in-depth video on the deep mulch gardening, and I'll try to link maybe a few good resources in the description if you aren't familiar with that method. But when we get to the other garden, you'll be able to see some more examples of that as well.
Rain freeze. I figured I'd take a minute and chat while I took a little break. Old girl ain't what she used to be, which is one of the reasons I'm changing my method inside of this garden. I've been doing basically no-till, and I mulch fairly decently in these 3 gardens. This is my original main garden, and they are I believe it's about 28 foot by 4 to 5 foot. They aren't uniform at all. They grow and then they shrink according to how I clean out these rows. And I'll show you what I did on the row over here. I mulch with wood chips in here, and over time they decompose, and underneath here you end up with, I don't have my gloves on so I don't want to show you, but I'll show you. You end up with some good composted soil underneath in the paths. Over time, the pathways build up with just decomposing wood chips and runoff from the other beds, erosion from the other beds, and it gets to where they're almost as level as the beds. So what I do is I go in and I take the dirt from the pathways and I sift it through this sifter that my husband made. It's 2x4s and 1/4 inch hardware cloth, and he made it to fit right on top of the wheelbarrow so I could just shake it. So I scoop up the dirt from the pathways, and this has been years of, like I said, the wood chips and everything breaking down. So I'm going to sift through it, and I found some grubs. So I save everything that I can throw into the chickens in this little bucket, and sifty, and I end up with this gorgeous, gorgeous compost. It almost looks like worm castings. And I have a lot of buckets that I have been filling up with bunny poo over the winter, and I'm topping it off with this, and I believe it's going to be nice rich soil. I will also mulch these pots as well. Found another grub. You don't want to keep any of your soil uncovered. I usually do 1 or 2 paths a year because it wears me out. I did this side over here this year. That's Ralph. So usually I've just put down some rabbit poo, compost, and then I mulch with my grass clippings, leaves. I've never done it really deep in this area, and the weeds have been a little bit of a problem, so it's getting harder and harder for me to do everything. So I'm finding ways that I can do it to make it much easier on myself. So lady of a certain age gardening, I guess you could say. So I wanted to just sit down and explain to you why I do some of what I do and some changes that I'm going to make. In this garden, I get a lot of shade. Right now where I'm sitting, it's real sunny because the leaves aren't on this huge oak tree that I have. So this front part gets quite a bit of shade, but this side and the back gets enough to where I can grow almost anything that I want as far as peppers, the things that need full sun, tomatoes, squash, green beans. I can do most any of that here, and that's part of the reason why I extended to the other part of the garden. You've seen that in a different video, but we'll do a total garden cleanup on that a little bit later. We've had rain off and on for the past 2 weeks, and I want to just get a few things in the ground today. I thought it might be a little too wet since it's been raining, but I think it'll work. So let's get some things in the ground.
So we've got some cool nights coming up, so I decided to plant some things that could handle that, some celery and some lettuce. I also planted some fennel, and it will perk up in a few days, and I've got some grass clippings to tuck in around that as well. And it took me almost 2 weeks to get the garden cleaned up, but here's the before and after.
It feels good to get that checked off the list, and there are still many more things on the list. The strawberries need thinned out, the potatoes needed planted 2 weeks ago. And one thing I do to help keep from feeling so overwhelmed is when there's a list of things to do, when I have the time or an allotted amount of time, I just do the next thing. Not the next thing on the list, but the next thing that I can get done at that moment. And I try not to sweat all the other things that need to get done. They'll get done when they get done. I thank y'all for hanging out with me, whether it's the strawberries or the potatoes or clearing out the garden. I know one thing is we'll be doing the next thing. My name's Loanna, and this is a little bit of homestead.